simply lowered the volume on that instrument to reflect his feelings, and it was immediately apparent from the record. María Elena, Buddy Hollis' wife, made a startling decision after her husband perished in that plane tragedy. She declined to attend the funeral. People believe she was too sad for decades. It wasn't the whole truth, though. María Elena eventually explained what actually transpired that day in 2024. Her disclosure of a heartbreaking secret altered our preconceived notions. Grief wasn't the only reason she stayed away. She was plagued by something far more sinister for 65 years. Buddy Holly was born in Lubbock, Texas, on September 7, 1936. Charles Hardin Holly was his true name. He came amid the Great Depression, one of the most difficult periods in American history. His family didn't have much money. Their little uninsulated home was where they resided. They occasionally had to rely on a well because they didn't have running water. Larry, his father, accepted every job he could find. Ella, his mother, spent every dime to provide food and clothing for the family. Despite the challenges they faced, their faith sustained them. Buddy was ignited by the hardships of his formative years. He had a more ambitious dream. The one bright light in the Holly house was music. In the evenings, the family would frequently play together. Buddy's mom was a pianist. His brothers were banjo and guitar players. Buddy made every effort to participate. Someone needs to sit and listen, his father joked. So he did. The difficult times were lessened by these family jam sessions. Even in times of financial need, they brought happiness into the home. For Buddy, such evenings sowed the seeds of his future. Buddy longed to be on stage like his big brothers when he was just 5 years old. They gave him a violin at a local talent show, but they had covertly lubricated the bow to prevent it from making any noise. The audience adored it as little Buddy played along, grinning broadly. He was even awarded a prize. His resolve was evident in that moment. He desired attention. No matter what, he wanted to be a part of the music. Buddy began to change as he got older. Following the rules and attending church, the boy started to rebel. He started sneaking out at night by high school. He frequented roadhouses and cafes with his pals. He had a drink. He gave smoking a try. They cursed. They even stole little items, such as records and chocolates. He appeared to be a courteous young guy by day, but at night he was a crazy one. The double existence had started. Buddy's first encounter with a female was the subject of one of the most startling tales from his early years. It was set up by his friends. They all watched and gave him coaching while it took place in a secret location. It was not romantic. It was about establishing his worth. He deviated from the morals his family had instilled in him that evening. It demonstrated his intense desire to shed the nice boy stereotype. Then came the turning point in the story. Buddy witnessed Elvis Presley perform twice in Lubbock in 1955. He was astounded by the first show. His life was altered by the second. He even had a backstage meeting with Elvis. Buddy's attitude impressed Elvis, who asked him to open for him at his upcoming performance. Buddy witnessed the force of rock and roll firsthand when he shared the stage with Elvis. This was what he wanted. He knew. His life's course was permanently altered that night. Elvis is the reason we owe it all, Buddy later stated. Buddy performed country and western music prior to meeting Elvis. He wanted to change things up after meeting Elvis. He began fusing rhythm and blues with country music. That was the kind of wild energy he desired in his song. Rock concert goers did more than simply listen. They screamed and danced. Buddy realized that there was more to rock and roll than just music. There was a movement. Fate changed Buddy's name when he got his first record contract with Decca in 1956. Holly A was accidentally omitted by a secretary. Buddy chose to keep it rather than fix it. Buddy Holly had a good voice. It was straightforward and simple to recall. That minor mistake led to a globally recognized name. Before he became famous, Buddy was already attracting attention. He made an appearance on Lubbock's local television in 1952. He displayed confidence beyond his years as he performed on a talent contest. He combined early rock, gospel, and country music. His innate charm was evident to the audience. He became a star because of that TV moment show. Buddy and his friend Bob Montgomery started a duo in 1953. They introduced themselves as Bob and Buddy. Anywhere they could, they played clubs, radio, school dances, and roller rinks. They were among the most well-liked performers in West Texas by 1954. Their blend of R&B, bluegrass, and country music was novel and captivating. The Nashville Scouts began to take notice. Buddy learned collaboration and crowd-pleasing techniques during those years with Bob. For Buddy Holly, everything changed in October 1955. At the age of 19, he was performing in Lubbock, Texas, as Bill Haley and his Comets opening act. The band that made Rock Around the Clock a #1 smash had the audience. However, there was a person in that crowd who would transform Buddy's life. Marty Robbins' manager and talent scout, Eddie Crandall, witnessed Buddy's unadulterated enthusiasm on stage. He was unable to turn away. The following evening, Crandall rewatched Buddy. At KDAV, Buddy was performing alongside Elvis Presley this time. Crandall wasted no time. He instructed the elderly Opry manager, Jim Denny, to assist Buddy. Idika Records received Buddy's demo tape from Denny. From a small stage in October 1955 to a major contract in just 4 months, Buddy secured a record deal by February 1956. It was a quick ascent for the Lubbock team, but instead of being a dream come true, it became a nightmare. His name was misspelled as Holly rather than Holly in the Dika contract. Although it didn't seem like much, it was the first time Buddy lost control. Owen Bradley, his producer, had no idea what rock and roll was. Bradley requested that Buddy give up playing the guitar. He brought session musicians from Nashville into the studio. It didn't feel right when he made Buddy sing light country pop songs. Buddy felt confined. Growing up, he had adored Elvis Presley's unadulterated sound. He was now forced to record what he perceived to be phony music. The studio became more tense. Buddy detested the noise. He detested losing his musical authority. It was more than just tunes. It has to do with Buddy's identity, and he was genuinely affected by it. The Nashville sessions were chaotic. Dika billed him as the 3 tunes and Buddy Holly. However, nothing made sense. He was compelled by the label to work with musicians who didn't have the same style. Buddy brought tremendous energy to the stage, but Bradley's production buried it. In April 1956, the first song, Blue Days, Black Nights, with Love Me on the flip side, was released. Only 19,000 copies were sold. At the time, that was a failure. Modern Don Juan, the following single, performed even worse. They had to borrow a bass from the great old Opry in order to complete one session because things had gotten that awful. Then, the actual insult arrived. That Will Be the Day, as recorded in July 1956. It was awful, Bradley thought. He wouldn't let it go. Buddy was broke at the conclusion of the year. The dream appeared to be over. The last blow was delivered in January of 1957. Buddy was dropped by Dika. They referred to him as untalented. Even A&R boss Paul Cohen declared Buddy to be the worst musician he had ever collaborated with, and things worsened. Buddy was prohibited from recording any of his Dika songs for 5 years by the contract his parents had signed for him. Buddy Holly was broke, embarrassed, and on the verge of giving up music at the age of 20. Buddy, however, refused to give up. He returned to Lubbock, his hometown. He began again. Buddy Holly and his band had a magical atmosphere when they arrived in Clovis, New Mexico. The studio of Norman Petty was no typical location. For aspiring musicians, it has so much cutting-edge equipment that even the studios in Los Angeles and New York couldn't compete. Petty had invested his money in large Leslie speakers, all-tech microphones, and the latest Macintosh tube equipment. The recording's warm, distinct sound, later dubbed the Clovis sound, came from this. The sound quality of such recordings continues to astound people. What made the studio even more unique after all these years was Petty's conviction that artists should be allowed to do things in their own way. The majority of record producers at the time sought total control, whereas Petty let musicians to be free. Buddy Holly was able to develop his own style as a result. The studio is still open for visits today. With the same instruments and equipment that contributed to the history of rock and roll, you may sit in the same room where Holly and the Crickets listened to their playbacks. The opening of the popular song, That'll Be the Day, is unexpected. In 1956, Buddy Holly and Jerry Allison, the drummer, watched The Searchers together. John Wayne's character in that movie kept stating, "That'll be the day." They remembered the line. Allison joked about it later when they were discussing writing a hit. Holly was moved by that small moment. He immediately got to work on a song. In 1956, the song's initial recording was made. It was rejected by Decca Records. The unusual sound Holly was making was incomprehensible to them. Holly made another attempt in 1957, a year later. He and Petty recorded it in Clovis this time. The new version peaked at #1 and became an enormous success. A rock and roll anthem that altered the course of music history was inspired by a sentence from a Western film. It was all made possible by another ingenious maneuver. Buddy was prohibited from re-recording any of the songs he had recorded with Decca for 5 years after his contract with them terminated in January 1957. Holly and the band, however, thought their new version of That'll Be the Day may be popular. As a result, they decided to call themselves the Crickets. They signed with Brunswick Records under that moniker. A member of Decca was Brunswick. However, the trick was successful. The song that Decca had previously rejected was being distributed without their knowledge. The list of insects was the source of the term itself. They enjoyed the idea of their music chirping out to the world and were influenced by other bands, such as the Spiders. They were able to break free thanks to this clever strategy, which also altered the way artists battled for ownership of their work. Additionally, Norman Petty developed a label technique that was novel at the time. Buddy's albums were released under 2 different aliases. While the Crickets songs were issued on Brunswick, his solo work was distributed on Coral. Decca included both labels. This allowed for the quicker release of additional recordings. Fans would occasionally witness new Buddy Holly or Cricket songs just a few weeks apart. This contributed to the mystery and suspense. Additionally, it made it possible for various tunes to be heard by various audiences. 7 of their songs made it into the top 40 between August 1957 and August 1958. Their names came to be associated with the beginnings of rock and roll. Buddy Holly was able to keep ahead of the competition and reach a wider audience because to Petty's strategy. It was in September 1957 that everything changed. That'll Be the Day peaked at #1 on the U.S. Billboard charts on September 22. Was at the top of the UK singles chart at the same time. Buddy Holly and the Crickets were now well known on both sides of the globe as a result. Not often for a white rock and roll group back then, the song also peaked at #2 on the R&B charts. Their music united people from many racial backgrounds. They were selected the most promising vocal group by Cashbox magazine at the conclusion of the year. When their records were performed in venues like the Royal in Baltimore and the Apollo Theater in New York, people of all backgrounds were drawn to the music. Nothing would be the same in the music industry. In August 1957, something much more significant occurred. Buddy Holly and the Crickets became the first white group to perform at the renowned Apollo Theater in Harlem on August 16. Black artists had long found a place in the theater. The Crickets had been mistakenly booked by promoters. Their sound led me to believe they were a black R&B group. The audience was taken aback when Holly and his band took the stage. Although they were first jeered, they won over everyone by the end of their 6-night stint. The Apollo's walls trembled with applause as the cheers were deafening. This demonstrated how music has the power to unite people and break down barriers. Between August 1957 and August 1958, Buddy Holly and the Crickets had 7 songs in the top 40 in a single year. That day will come. Rock history was shaped by the songs Peggy Sue, Oh Boy, Maybe Baby, Rave On, and Listen to Me. This occurred during a period when songs had a considerably harder time rising through the charts. Buddy completed all of this before turning 23. His quick success is evidence of his skill and diligence. His melodies are still cherished today since they served as an inspiration to other musicians. Buddy Holly became even more well-known as a result of his appearances on the E.D. Sullivan program. He sang Peggy Sue and That'll Be the Day on December 1st, 1957. Millions of people watched. Teenagers may easily relate to him because of his neat appearance and horn-rimmed glasses. In January 1958, he made his second appearance. His records rose in the charts as a result of these 2 appearances. Young British musicians were also profoundly impacted by them. The Beatles said that watching Holly on TV served as their inspiration. They were following in E.D. Sullivan's footsteps when they performed on him 6 years later. Buddy Holly helped ignite a global music movement with just 2 performances. In the meantime, Buddy Holly was to be mentored by Norman Petty. However, he was a very different person behind the scenes. He instructed the band to read and carry Bibles. He gave sermons about maintaining morality while traveling. He did, however, retain the band's royalties. He opened accounts in his own name with their funds. Things became more obvious after Buddy married María Elena Santiago. Petty had been keeping their royalties for months. As her aunt, who was in the music business, found out, Petty was not only in charge of their finances, he was also attempting to manipulate their thoughts. His behavior ruined the band's reputation and tarnished its friendships. The story didn't end there. Additionally, Buddy's publishing rights were stolen by Petty. Norva Jack Music was the name of his business. Buddy transferred the rights to I Know I'll Have the Blues Again on May 28, 1958. From 1956 to 1958, it was a recurring theme in all of his songs. Petty signed songs that he didn't even write. As a result, Petty made more money off Buddy's tunes than Buddy did. Millions of copies of the records were sold. Almost none of that money went to Buddy. Although Buddy struggled, Petty benefited much from Buddy's labor. Buddy was having a lot of problems by the end of 1958. Petty was broke as a result of his tricks. All of the royalties were retained by Petty in his personal bank accounts. Buddy discovered how awful it was when he relocated to New York. He couldn't get paid because of the legal situation, and Petty was keeping his money. Then Buddy was sued by Manny Greenfield, a promoter. Buddy's royalties were frozen by the court. Buddy had no option because he was broke and had a mountain of bills. In order to survive, he embarked on the Harsh Winter Dance Party tour at the beginning of 1959. Buddy's family fought for the money Petty stole for decades after his passing. Buddy's money wasn't merely taken by Petty. He also disbanded the band. He was able to turn Joe Malden and Jerry Allison against Buddy. They remained faithful to Petty after Buddy moved to New York. The Crickets had been eliminated. Buddy lost the group that made him famous, along with his pals and band. Petty continued to manage the Crickets' careers. Buddy was abandoned, alone. Early in 1959, Buddy was in dire straits. He was prepared to sue Petty. However, Petty was still refusing to give his money, so he had no money for attorneys. Buddy was therefore forced to go on the Winter Dance Party tour. The circumstances were appalling. It was freezing on the buses. It was a demanding timetable. And then, on February 3rd, 1959, there was the crash. Buddy's death marked the end of his legal battle. However, his family continued to quarrel for years. One of rock's finest talents ultimately passed away penniless. It's due of treachery rather than failure. But loss wasn't the only thing in Buddy's life. He entered Peer Music in New York on June 1958. He met María Elena Santiago there. His age was 21 and hers was 25. Buddy instantly fell in love with her. On the same day, he asked her out. He needed to get her aunt's approval, she said. Yes, he did. They spoke for 5 hours. By night's end, Buddy proposed to her and gave her a rose. Yes, María Elena replied. August 15th, 1958 was their wedding date. It happened so quickly that the entire industry was taken aback. Their romance turned into a legend. It did not make everyone pleased. Petty believed Buddy's reputation would be damaged by the marriage. He instructed María Elena to act as though she was merely the secretary for the cricket. Buddy's father was taken aback as well. María Elena was not readily accepted by the people of Lubbock. She was Catholic and from Puerto Rico. She was an outsider because of that. Buddy didn't care, though. He supported her. For love, he disobeyed everyone. Buddy took a risk after the wedding. He severed his relationship with the insects and Petty. He relocated to Greenwich Village with María Elena. It was a fresh beginning. Started recording and writing by himself. He experimented with different noises. He sought freedom of expression. He composed some of his most intimate songs over that brief period. Buddy Holly didn't embark on his last tour in search of fame. He had no other option, so he did it. Holly discovered he couldn't access the majority of his money after severing his relationship with his manager Norman Petty. Holly was left penniless after Petty maintained control over the royalties. The pregnancy of María Elena, Holly's wife, made matters worse. Bills were mounting quickly after they had recently relocated to New York City. Holly had a strong desire to support his family. He so consented to the harsh 24-show winter dance party tour throughout the Midwest's icy landscape. He could think of no other method to earn rapid money. María Elena will always be haunted by the decision he made to leave her behind. Although the trip promised money, it came with harsh weather and constant travel. One of the harshest winters in Midwest history occurred in 1959. On the first day of the trip in Milwaukee, the temperature dipped to minus 17 degrees. The depth of the snow was 13 inches. And it wasn't until dusk that the temperature rose above zero. The temperature dropped to minus 36 degrees in some locations. The majority of the artists had never encountered such weather before. The bus broke down in the middle of the night, sending drummer Carl Bunch to the hospital with frostbite. The gang continued to fall ill. They performed night after night, freezing and fatigued, with no time for respite. They had terrible buses. They were given decrepit school buses that kept breaking down in place of actual tour buses. Most of the time, the heaters weren't working. In order to stay warm, the musicians burnt newspapers inside the bus because they were so cold. At least 5 buses passed by, and each one was just as awful as the one before it. Carl Bunch was unable to continue due to severe frostbite. The others had to cover for him. Each journey turned perilous, testing their limits. The itinerary for the tour was completely nonsensical. Through the Midwest, the road made erratic zigzags. The following night, they had to travel over 300 miles to Davenport after playing St. Paul on January 28. After there, it was back north to Green Bay and Duluth. There were some 400-mile drives. There were no days off. Even loading and unloading their own equipment was a task for the musicians. The tour became utterly miserable due to the cold, the distance, and the broken buses. It was dubbed the Tour from Hell by one historian. It seemed as though the booking agents had used a map and darts to organize the stops. For the tour, Holly had assembled a new band. Bassist Waylon Jennings played. Tommy Alsop was a guitarist. On drums was Carl Bunch. Before they left, they had hardly practiced. Even though they were exhausted from the tour, they still gave it their all every night. The others had to alternate on the drums while Bunch was in the hospital. These names would be permanently linked by the crash that halted the tour. It would be the beginning of a lengthy and illustrious career for Jennings, but it came at a horrible cost. The band's final performance took place at the Surf Ballroom in Clear Lake, Iowa, on February 2, 1959. After that, Holly made the decision to rent a plane since she was tired of the cold and the faulty buses. In order to rest and do laundry, he wanted to arrive in Moorhead, Minnesota before the bus arrived. The tiny Beechcraft Bonanza could only accommodate the pilot and 3 other passengers. When the Big Bopper became ill, he invited Waylon Jennings to take his place. Jennings concurred. It was a decision he would live to regret. For the final seat, Ritchie Valens and Tommy Alsop flipped a coin. Valens won by calling heads. Unaware that it would be his last, he remarked, "That's the first time I've ever won anything in my life." Roger Peterson, the pilot, was just 21 years old. 128 of his 711 flight hours were in a Bonanza. He had failed his instrument check ride 9 months prior, and he was not licensed to fly with just instruments. In contrast to Peterson's experience, the Bonanza's attitude indicator operated in the other manner. Peterson probably believed he was climbing on that gloomy, snowy night, but he was actually diving quickly. At 3,000 feet per minute, the plane crashed. It wasn't until it was too late that he understood he was in trouble. At 12:55 a.m., the aircraft took off. Wednesday, February 3, 1959. In a matter of minutes, it disappeared off radar. Approximately 5 miles northwest of Clear Lake, it crashed in a frozen cornfield. At 170 Montserrat Mape, the aircraft struck the ground nose down, its right wingtip digging into the ground. Before coming to a stop near a fence, the wreckage fell 540 feet. On impact, all 4 men perished. It took 9 in the morning to locate the crash scene. The field was quiet except for the wind, and the debris had been covered with snow. The severity of the crash was revealed by the autopsies. There was a split in the middle of Buddy Hollis' forehead. He had lost half of his brain tissue. His face and even his scrotum were sliced, his limbs and legs were fractured, and his chest was crushed. Fingerprints were required to identify his body. There were speculations that the Big Boppers escaped the crash since his body was flung far from the wreck. However, his injuries showed differently. It was an abrupt, cruel, and devastating loss. Nothing would be the same in the music industry. On February 3, 1959, everything in María Elena Hollis' world broke apart. Buddy Holly has barely been her husband for 6 months. Their first kid was 2 weeks along in her pregnancy. The news that arrived altered the course of that morning, which had begun like any other. Neither the authorities nor a family member told her. Rather, it was broadcast on television as a breaking news report. Her body could not handle the jolt. She lost her kid within a day. She lost her husband and her pregnant child in one horrible moment. She later talked about her heartbreak. "I blamed myself," she said. When Buddy left, she wasn't feeling good. She had pleaded with him to remain. She thought he would never have gotten on that plane if she had accompanied him. Her remarks were painful, revealing the weight of her shame. Her tragedy served as a reminder of how private lives may be destroyed by public sadness. The way such news is disseminated has actually changed as a result. The horror was heightened by the manner in which the families received the news. The same thing happened to Buddy's mother. She heard it in Lubbock, Texas on the radio. She fell and yelled. The fact that such a personal loss was publicized before the families were even informed infuriated people. There was a lot of criticism directed at the media. There has to be a change. And it did. A new regulation was developed by news organizations nationwide. Until their families were informed, they would never give names to the deceased. This tragedy gave rise to the regulation, which is still in effect today. It demonstrated that compassion and consideration must come first, even in reporting. It evolved into a norm that influenced how tragic news was covered by television and newspapers. María Elena was unable to attend Buddy's funeral because she was too physically and emotionally shattered. The date was February 7, 1959. At Lubbock's Tabernacle Baptist Church, on the advice of her physician, she remained in New York. She was too weak to travel because of the stress and grief. She was never able to visit his grave to say farewell. She never visited his resting place. She carried her shame with her. She frequently claimed that the collision might not have occurred if she had been with him. Fans, friends, and family came together to grieve him. However, the vacant spot where his young bride should have been demonstrated the extent of the suffering. Words could never express how much her absence said. A farmer discovered something that would lead to decades of rumors 2 months after the tragedy. The pistol was .22 caliber. Buddy Holly was the owner of the firearm. Wild hypotheses were sparked by its finding. Roger Peterson, the pilot, was thought to have been shot. Others pictured an internal conflict that caused the jet to crash. The muttering persisted. J.P. Richardson, the Big Bopper, had his body unearthed in 2007. Leading the test was renowned anthropologist Dr. Bill Bays. There was no indication of foul play or bullet marks. The impact of the collision had killed Richardson. The gun was still a sinister symbol. A reminder that there might never be answers to some of the concerns raised by that awful night.